Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. This is going to be my Flash episode 17 video. Whole lot of Mark Hamill, whole lot of Reverse Flash. I know you guys all have really big questions about the WTF reveal, like the big Reverse Flash stuff in this episode, so I'm going to start with that and then I'll do my top 5 moments. So just careful for spoilers if you haven't seen the episode yet. I've already seen a lot of comments from you guys, so this is what's going on. There is still one Reverse Flash on the show. It's Eobard Thawne, but you can think of it as being one person in two different bodies. He basically absorbed Harrison Wells' DNA so that he could become him on the genetic level, but retain all of the aspects of himself as Eobard Thawne so that he could still tap into the Speed Force. Interesting to note that he ran out, so to speak, of Speed Force when he was fighting with Barry Allen in the past. They haven't fully explained it on the show yet. I'm hoping they do before the end of the season, but the Reverse Flash doesn't tap into the Speed Force in the same way that the Flash does. He taps into the negative Speed Force, which is a different thing. But for all intents and purposes, the Harrison Wells that you saw in the flashback was a totally different character. Think of him as like Harrison Wells Prime. Very eclectic, nice scientist, looking forward to building star labs in the future. Based on what Eobard Thawne said, whenever Harrison Wells has been talking to Gideon the computer, looking at the newspaper from the future, that's the date that Harrison Wells originally built the particle accelerator and the accident created Barry Allen. Eobard Thawne, the Reverse Flash, came back in time, killed Barry's mother, and then said, I need that to happen a little bit sooner than expected. And then he took on Harrison Wells' persona. I don't know how the show's going to treat the mythology of the Speed Force, because it gets a little crazy in the comics. But because they just said the words Speed Force on the show, I don't think they're going to explain the negative Speed Force for a while. If you guys have read Flash Rebirth, let me know, do you think that they're going to incorporate the negative Speed Force, or do you think they're just going to simplify it all? Regardless of what they do, the big takeaway is that Harrison Wells is really more like Eobard Thawne wearing Harrison Wells as a meat suit. I know this raises a whole lot more questions now because of the way the Flash's relationship with Eddie Thawne has changed. Eddie Thawne is still like the great-great-grandfather of Eobard Thawne. But here we go, getting into top 5 moments. So, number 5, Reverse Flash flashbacks. So we get a slow-mo of the night that Barry's mom died. We get to see him like jumping around, punching the shit out of each other. It doesn't fully explain what's going on. It's just meant to reveal that Eobard Thawne was not Harrison Wells. Like, they're two different people. Although technically on the show, they look like the same person in present day. I have no idea how they're going to incorporate that other actor into the show. We might just see him in flashbacks and flash forwards. Although technically a flash forward would be a flashback because he was in the future and then traveled back to the past. I know it sounds kind of funny when you think about it that way. In the comics, there have been a couple times where they devote like single issues to explaining the Reverse Flash's backstory, like Eobard Thawne's backstory. The Once and Future Flash is a really good read, and the Prelude to Flashpoint are both really good Eobard Thawne explainers. Moving on to number 4, Meet the Tricksters. He was answering questions on Twitter during the episode. Someone asked him, is this your character from the original Flash series? Is that in continuity? He said, kind of, but if it's in continuity, just assume that there was no Flash during his era. But he actually started in 2 episodes of the original series. There was only 1 season of that. The younger Trickster is the Axel Walker Trickster. Obviously, they had that really funny Easter egg where he's like, I am your father. That Darth Vader Empire Strikes Back moment. That was so awesome. That's bending continuity just a little bit from the comics. In the comics, takes the mantle of the Trickster and tries to start committing crimes. James Jesse gets pissed, takes back all his stuff, beats the shit out of Axel Walker and says, never use my name again. So early in the episode, when Mark Hamill gets really pissed off, that's accurate to the comics. The TV show just made best use of their Jedi Master while they had him. If we ever see a Trickster again, it'll probably be the Axel Walker Trickster. He'll probably come back on the show. And just because I don't think Mark Hamill's coming back before the end of the season, doesn't mean he won't ever come back in season 2 or season 3. He said that he mostly came back so that he could work with John Wesley's ship again, which was really touching. And they used some of the music cues from his original appearance on the classic series. So like whenever he's on screen, they have like some classic Trickster music in the background. You could barely hear it. They even had his original costume in his lair, like the original costume he wore on the 90s series. Or actually, it's probably a recreation. Moving on to number 3, Team Flash protects Iris. This is really cool. Barry reveals himself to 2 new people, including his dad. You always did look good in red. It was also really cool that they brought him back to Star Labs, just, like nice homage to the original series. If you never watched the original series, Amanda Pays was kind of like the Harrison Wells of that show, like the scientist that helped him out. Actually, maybe it's better to call her the Caitlin Snow of that show, because they had something of a ship going on. And she was not also secretly the Reverse Flash. The Eddie Thawne reveal, also really big, but more of like a WTF way. Just the look on his face. You can fit like a giant fish in his mouth. Like that's how much his jaw dropped. And remember, because Barry changed the timeline, they're still totally BFFs. If you have read the comics, I do feel like they're pushing Eddie Thawne in a Hunter Solomon direction. So I always knew at some point he would learn who Barry is, because in the comics, Hunter and Wally West are good friends, and Hunter knows that Wally West is the Flash. I may have mentioned it before, but the TV series, the Flash show, is blending the Wally West and the Barry Allen storylines. So if you want to read the comics, you have to like look back to Barry Allen stuff, and you have to read the Wally West stuff, which is basically like Jeff Johns' run. Eddie Thawne seems like he's totally on board with what Barry Allen and Joe are doing. Like he totally buys into it. What we should really be worried about is how much he's been appearing with Harrison Wells in these pictures, or Tom Cavanaugh, who we now know is Eobard Thawne. What I think is going to end up happening is Eobard Thawne will try to start manipulating Eddie, and Eddie will become collateral damage, either through mind control from Grodd or from Rainbow Raider, who we actually saw in the trailer after the episode. If you have read the comics and you know what happens to Hunter Solomon, just please use spoiler tags. Moving on to number 2, Eobard Thawne teaches Barry how to phase. This was the really awesome spectacle of the episode. I think we all knew it was going to happen at some point. The Flash has been able to phase through stuff since the classic comics. Running through something is just one way to get that armband off. He could have just vibrated his wrist really fast, but it wouldn't have looked nearly as cool. And that speech that Tom Cavanaugh had, that is my new favorite speech all season long. Just replay that speech over and over. It's almost like Eobard Thawne is in love with the Speed Force. Like those two should go off and get a room. Grant Gustin said, like outside of the episode, that this was probably one of Tom Cavanaugh's best performances in an episode. He was also referring to him playing the different version of his character in the flashbacks before he'd had all his DNA sucked out. And finally, my number 1 WTF moment, Eobard Thawne drinks Harrison Wells like he's a milkshake. Make as many Paul Thomas Anderson jokes as you want. Milkshakes being drunk all over the place. Speed Force milkshakes, DNA milkshakes. I heard a couple journalists using the term genetic camouflage, so that might be the official line from the Flash writer's room, like what Eobard Thawne is doing, just calling it genetic camouflage. In case you didn't catch it too, he kind of reused the line whenever he killed Cisco in episode 15. To me, your wife has been dead for centuries. That was just what he said to Cisco. I'm sorry, but to me, you've been dead for centuries. Here's my big question for you guys. Now that we know that Eobard Thawne is wearing a Harrison Wells meat suit and we've gotten some flashbacks, do you think we're going to see a flash forward, or like, I guess, a flashback to when Eobard Thawne was in the future? I feel like they need to tell the story about why he originally came back and needed to kill Barry Allen's mother, even though that's been in the comics for a long time. The show's designed so that people who don't read the comics can follow it, so they need to keep explaining Eobard Thawne. We're only about halfway there. And just to be clear, the 2020 date on the newspaper is when the Flash was first created. The Reverse Flash came back in time and jump-started it sooner. Eobard Thawne himself is from the 25th century, which is much, much, much further in the future. Some other really cool things that I may not have mentioned in my trailer video, we see Grant Gustin in the secret lair, so he finds out about the Gideon computer eventually. I've already talked about Rosamel and the Firestorm team up, but what I really want to know is what is the Reverse Flash going to try and do with all the metahumans that they've locked up? Is he going to unleash them all and just cause a bunch of chaos as a distraction while he does something else? Or is he going to try and tap into their energy somehow? If you guys ever read The Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Anti-Monitor actually hooked up a bunch of superheroes to giant machines. So, in my fantasy, they have like a scene like that where you have like all these metahumans plugged into this giant Reverse Flash machine. I don't think that's going to happen though. That's just like wishful thinking. So don't forget, new episode of Arrow tomorrow. The schedule is a little wonky, so when we see Arrow tomorrow, it will technically be taking place after next week's episode of The Flash. It's a little bit weird because it's like they're like one episode apart, but I'll try and explain again whenever I post my Arrow video. In case you haven't seen it yet, you can click here for the finale trailer, for like the trailer with footage from the rest of the episodes. And you can click here to learn all about the Deadpool movie. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tomorrow.